Hi, in that video I want to show you the GIT Resource extension from Rasia, Switzerland. This extension allows you to use Git as an internal virtual file system inside Lucee. First of all, you need to install the extension. I already did that, but you can do it by going to, in the Lucee Server Administrator, you go to Extensions Applications. And there you will find the Git resource extension. You see, in my case, it's already installed, but you will find it with not installed extension and can simply install it by. After that, I will show you how you can use that extension. First of all, we make a simple call, a listening of the root of a repository. I do that with the Lucee repository. So what we have, the Git resource always start with Git, so that prefix is Git, so we know, so Lucee knows which virtual resource to use. Then we need the repository URL. We go to, in that case, the Lucee GitHub, and there we have clone or download, and we get here the URL from, in that case, from the Lucee Git. We simply copy that. Then we add the URL here. We remove the protocol because we need the Git protocol, but we keep the rest in place. So we have github.com lucee/git, and then starting here we have the path into the repository. So we indicate that this way. Then we can go inside the repository. So we have a directory listening, we want to have it as a query, the result, and we dump the output. So let's see what happens. Okay, here we have the result. We see the root content of that repository. The first call will take a little bit longer because it has to download the repository locally. Then in the future it will just pull, if necessary, changes from the remote repository. But the first call, the initial call, will take a little bit longer, but following calls will be much shorter. Okay, now we have the root. As you have seen, we have here, for example, the folder loader. We then simply can go into the repository, list loader. You see, then we get the content from that folder. You see here a folder information. Something similar, we can make a file read, for example, and we have inside the loader, we have the POM XML. And when we execute that, you see we get content from that POM XML, and you see here, for example, the POM XML contains the version number of that specific Lucee version in the repository. This is the master branch, so that's 5.7 whatever. And if we want to use another branch, let's say, for example, in the Lucee repository, we want to use the 5.2 branch, what has the current stable release. We simply add 5.2, the branch name, in front of the repository URL. So we have 5.2 here defined as a specific branch. When we execute that now, we disable first the other call, otherwise we have too much output. You see, now we get 5.2.9.9 snapshot. So we switch it to the 5.2 branch. With this example, we have all the information in the path. We have the repository and the branch information as part of the path. But we can also move that information to the application CFC, as I do in that case. So you see, I no longer have the repository URL, I don't have the branch information, I just have the pure path inside the repository, so loader POM XML. And then I define these things in the application CFC. So we first define the branch. We can do that with this git.branch and then the branch information. In that case, I take 5.3. And then we add the repository URL, what is the same. In that case, I can add the protocol, but it's not really necessary. You can do it, but you don't have to. When we now go here, we disable the previous one and we execute that. You see it still works, and now we have 5.3.1.16 beta, so we are on the 5.3 branch. We no longer have the information with the path itself, we have it in the application CFC. Okay, so far we only handled public repositories, but of course not all repositories are public and you maybe want to handle a private repository. So how you do that? Here I have again a directory listening, and to list the root directory of the repository. And now we define in the application CFC also the credentials. First of all, I have here another repository. In that case, it's not on GitHub, it's on Bitbucket, but also Git repository. And that one is private, so you don't can access it without credentials. I have stored my credentials in an include file, so not to expose it in that video, but that you could of course define it directly with the variable. You see, I define git username and git password, so I can pass these credentials. So when I execute that, first of all, maybe we execute it without the credentials so you can see what happens. See, we get an exception, authentication is required, blah blah blah. So we need an authentication. Now we enable the username and password in the application CFC. So we have that. First request can take a little bit longer because it has to download the repository on an initial request. Here we are. Now we have the listening of that private repository and we can use it exactly the same way. What you also can do is use Git directly as a source for your source code. You can define your definition inside the administrator. So for that we go to the web administrator. Then we go to mappings. And here I create a mapping. Let's call it slash Lucee admin. Then as a resource, we have here, it's already set. You see, github.com, Lucee, git core source main. That points to the Lucee administrator. So we store that. We can also set inspect to never. That way it does not always update and check for changes in the repository. There is another video from Lucee that explains this in detail about the S3 resource. So we check that. When I call now that URL, that was localhost, and we have the mappy Lucee admin, and it is admin.cfm. You see, we get now the Lucee administrator, but that comes directly from GitHub. It's no longer from a local copy. So you can have your own source code coming from GitHub directly. And if there are any change in GitHub, you simply can use the function page pool clear to flush the cache. But like I said, the S3 resource video will explain that in detail. So, but what about the private repository? Most likely you have your source code on a GitHub repository that's not public to the world. So you want to define credentials. With the S3 resource, for example, you can define the credential as part of the path. But for security reasons, the Git resource does not support that. You only can define the credentials with the application CFC, as I did show you before, or you can define the credential as an environment variable or as a system property. For example, with Tomcat, what it comes with Lucee by default, with all installers and Express version, you have inside the bin directory, you have a file called zenv.sh. When it does not exist, you simply can create that file. And then the file should look like this. You define simply in the file, you define the credential in that way, lucee.git.username. So when I define the credential as a environment variable in that way, and I have to restart that the JVM is picking up this on environment variables. We are done. So now you don't longer have to define the environment variables in the application CFC. You still can. Lucee will always first look in the application CFC for the credentials, and only if there are no credentials in the application CFC, it will pick the environment variables. So now it will still work. The directory listening without the credential will still work, because now the credentials coming from the environment variable. So you see it's still working. And you now can define also a private repository, and Lucee then will pick up the credential from the environment variables. So that means you can use the Git resource not only for artifacts, you can also use it for your complete source code. Okay, that's about the Git resource. You can test that the resource at the moment is in beta state, so you can test, and if you have any problem with it, please report on the rasia.ch contact form, or you can contact me directly via michael@rasia.ch. Thank you for listening.